media release, so please text any questions that you might have. With that, we'll jump into what we're announcing today. So really today it's actually kind of two announcements. One is a consumer protection announcement, and the second is an announcement of a new, very important lawsuit that our office filed this morning in state court, both relating to the same set of facts. The consumer protection announcement is it's a consumer alert for all Nebraskans, but in particular Nebraska parents who might be purchasing home surveillance equipment, in particular home cameras that might be used in a nursery. And what we're informing people is that a certain manufacturer by the name of Lorex, who we also have sued, are using cameras with known security issues that have ties to the Chinese Communist Party and are very susceptible to hackers. Now, they would otherwise know about this, except for the fact that both the manufacturer as well as the sites that are selling these products are telling consumers that these products, these cameras are safe and that they're secure and that they protect their privacy. We believe that those things are misleading and not ultimately true. So we want all Nebraskans to be aware of this, that if they are looking at purchasing Lorex manufactured cameras, that they should think twice. At the same time, we have filed a lawsuit using our consumer protection and UDIPTA authorities against the Lorex company for making misleading statements about the security and privacy protections of these cameras. That is what we're doing today. Let me give you just a few minutes of context about some of the background. So there is a Chinese company by the name of Dahua. Dahua is actually a Chinese military company. It has significant ties to the Chinese military, the Chinese Communist Party. This company makes all sorts of surveillance equipment. Their equipment actually has been used to surveil the Uyghurs, as you know, an exploited minority that's been enslaved within China. These manufactured products, these cameras, have all sorts of known security concerns. They are easily susceptible to hackers. They provide backdoors to enable people to access the audio and video of those particular cameras. We know both because of that company being a Chinese military company, as well as the Chinese law, the 2017 National Intelligence Act, that provides any company in China that has information related to their national security has to give that information upon request to the Chinese Communist Party. That this information, surveillance information from, say, those in the United States, is then accessible to the Chinese government. In 2021, actually, Dahua had a brand name not by the name of Lorex. So Lorex used to be a Dahua company. In 2021, the federal government, the FCC, other federal officials, including a joint congressional executive committee on Chinese spying and infiltration, uncovered the issues with Dahua, made some determinations that Dahua cameras could not be sold under certain circumstances, and made the public aware of the significant security concerns relating to Dahua manufactured products. The day before that order came down, Dahua sold Lorex, its company, to another company. It spun it off, and leaving the impression that that new company was not actually using the same types of products. They didn't have the same types of security concerns. An impression, by the way, that is buttressed by the public statements that Lorex makes online, that these products are safe, that they protect their privacy, that they take every step that they can to protect people's privacy. For the last 3 or 4 years, these products have been sold. They're sold on popular websites like Costco, Home Depot, Office Depot, Best Buy, Kohl's. They are marketed to families. These are cameras that are being placed in people's nurseries. They're cameras that are watching the most intimate parts of people's home or the places surrounding their homes. They're told to regular Nebraskans and Americans, for that matter, that these products are safe and you can trust that your very private data, the very audio and video of your internal home, especially with your own child potentially in your nursery, are safe from others. Unfortunately, that split when Lorex left Dahua was in name only. We know that the manufacture, the infrastructure, the firmware of these particular products are still made by Dahua. They're still connected to Dahua. They still have the same significant security concerns that were identified in 2021 and before. So you now have products that are being sold to Nebraskans, and we know not just the sites I mentioned to you, but also including Nebraska Furniture Mart. These are being sold and marketed to Nebraskans under the auspices of, with specific representations that these are safe and private. We know that they're not. We know that they have backdoors to the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party. We also know that given the significant security concerns, these are well known to other hackers. So even people who are not part of the Chinese government, even people who are not part of Dahua, have access to these back-end systems that they can exploit. And we also know, if you were at our Human Trafficking Summit last week, you would know the significant issues surrounding online child exploitation. And cameras of this type that have these types of security concerns have been exploited by predators who can access these types of cameras, use the audio or visual to try to gain access to young children. Significant concerns in Nebraskans. If Lorex or these other companies made clear that their cameras had significant security concerns, would expose their nurseries to third-party, either hackers, the Chinese government, and provide them with access to the audio and visual of secure parts of their home. If they wanted to tell people that, they could. They very well likely would not have very many customers, but they could do that. But they didn't, and that's why we ultimately are filing our lawsuit, because they have been dishonest with Nebraska consumers, and under our Consumer Protection and Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act, we think that's unlawful. So we filed the suit this morning. We're seeking both civil penalties as well as injunctive relief. We think this is a critical issue, not just for Nebraskans' own privacy and security, but also it's a geopolitical issue. As you know, if you've been following the work of this office, we think we've been a national leader on fighting back against consumer products that have Chinese Communist Party ties. Just this summer, we filed suit against Temu, one of the first in the country, alleging kind of similar set of allegations that they're misleading Americans, misleading Nebraskans, at the same time getting access to some of their most intimate information. We also have led what we think is the largest consumer protection suit in the state against TikTok for similar types of misrepresentations. So we think this is a really enormous geopolitical issue, and we're doing what we can here in Nebraska. So that's what we've done today. I'm happy to answer any questions. Andrew.
I guess, do you have an idea of the scope of these products and their use in Nebraska? I guess, do you have any instances where Nebraska consumers have had instances of hacking, or if they've suffered harm because of this?
That's a really good question, Andrew. So the question is, do we have data on sort of the scope of the problem and whether consumers have any instances where consumers have been hacked? They're kind of actually two separate questions. The first is the potential scope of the problem, what kind of volume of cameras have been sold in Nebraska. We don't have the exact number on that, Andrew. I think it's reasonable to assume that it's significant, in the thousands, if not tens of thousands, just given sort of the volume of significant national retailers who are selling into the state, including the Nebraska Furniture Mart. Now that is, we don't have this precise data. It's important on your second question, which is, do we have instances where people have been hacked? Hopefully there are none, by the way. We hope that there are none. Like, we're hopeful that we're getting well enough advanced to the problem that there will be none. If there are any, we hope there aren't, but if there have been any, or if there are any in the future, that actually is not part of our core part of our suit. Of course, we're trying to stop that from happening, but our suit is about the misrepresentations about the products. If that were to happen, then they could be exposed to a whole set of other legal liability, like potentially a plaintiff's class action, as an example. If Nebraskans' individual rights could be asserted if that were to happen. So no, we haven't had anyone that we're aware of come to our office, but we're also not in the discovery phase yet.
Lorex is different than Dahua now because they're separate companies. But you're saying that Lorex still uses Dahua technology, or that, if you still have cameras that were associated with Dahua when they were kind of together, that's the kind of issue. What's really the big deal?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Anthony's question, hey, they're separate, so what's the big deal? They've been separated. I think the big deal is that they were only separated in name only. So the real concern is not the name. It's not Lorex or Dahua. The real concern is, what does the hardware and software enable you to do? And Dahua, as it was being operated in 2021 and before, had hardware and software and firmware that allowed both the Chinese government as well as other nefarious actors fairly easy access to people's surveillance cameras. The audio, the video, even if you turned off the audio, they could still access it. So that's a big concern. Just because they changed the name, the underlying hardware, firmware, software is all the same. In fact, in our complaint, Anthony, you will see that if you actually go to one of the links through Lorex to be able to log in, it takes you to a Dahua website. So what we're saying is, you can sort of change the lipstick on the pig, but it's still a pig. Nothing has changed from the underlying infrastructure that enables for these security these security loopholes and backdoors into people's private spaces.
So they're still using Dahua as a means of like making these cameras and just putting Lorex's name on it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's essentially like a white label. So a white label product would be, you have one manufacturer who manufactures something, and then someone else buys that. They put their brand name on it, and then they sell it. It's essentially a white label concept. So yes, it's exactly right.
What was the kind of red flag that tipped you guys off about this, the security issues with this, the software, the hardware in these cameras? I mean, have there been previous lawsuits against this company in the past that you guys are picking up on, or what's kind of the sticking point for you and the red flag?
Yeah, it's a good question. So John's question is what sort of is the thing that the impetus or maybe the catalyst for our work? So there has been a number of very public forward-facing documents, analyses from various parties. I mentioned a couple before. There was the Congressional Executive Chinese Committee. The FCC has sent letters. And by the way, this has all been bipartisan, so Republicans, Democrats, not dependent on any administration. In 2023, there was a very recent letter sent to Costco that sort of outlined these concerns. We started to see this summer, we started to see some of these products being sold through Nebraska retailers. And we became aware of a lot of the background research that's publicly available, and started to sync those two things together and say, hey, not only does this appear to be a problem in the recent past, it's a problem that exists today, and it's a problem that's happening in Nebraska. So it just sort of happened a little bit organically over the summer. Yeah, Andrew.
You mentioned the consumer protection alert, and you just mentioned kind of Nebraska retailers selling these. Are you hoping that your action today is urging these stores to get these products off their shelves? I mean, do you want to see basically this company stop doing business in Nebraska?
No, it's a very good question. So Andrew's question is, are we seeking to have the company stop doing business? Actually, the core of our complaint is not to stop selling. It's kind of similar to Temu. When we sued Temu, we didn't say stop selling Temu. What we said was, be honest with what you're doing. Just either be honest or don't sell. So if you don't want to be honest with consumers, and you're going to sell products, in this case, that pose significant security and privacy risks to their family, and you don't want to tell them that, then yeah, you should stop selling. But if you do want to tell them that, these are not banned products. You have to just simply be honest with. I mean, they are within certain national security contexts of government agencies, federal government contractors. You can't go to Offutt Air Force Base and install a Lorex camera. So they are banned in some contexts. But all we're saying, they're not banned. So we're just saying, just be honest with consumers, and let the free market speak. If there are a lot of people who want to buy cameras that they know expose their children, as an example, to Chinese sort of surveillance, or hackers who might want to prey on their kids, there may be people who want to buy that. I'm willing to bet that market's pretty small and not very economically feasible. So no, we're not seeking. So what we'd say to Costco or these other retailers is to say, hey, you should just look very carefully at what you're selling and make sure that you're either being honest about it and that the disclaimers that are on there are truthful and explicit, or if they're not, make sure that you change those. It's a good question. Anything online, Suzanne? Okay.
I have a question that's slightly unrelated to this, but Secretary of State Bob Evans sent you a letter asking for advice about the DOJ request for voter information.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak about where that's at right now from your guys'?
Sure. So the question is on there's been a recent request to the Secretary of State from the Department of Justice regarding a certain set of voter information. I think it's the voter file, driver's license numbers, and the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. It's in active litigation right now, so I can't say maybe as much as I would want, but let me just tell you a couple things. The first is, I think, actually, to put it in context, I think this voter fraud issue is a very significant issue that people need to look at. There's no doubt there's voter fraud that goes on around the country. In fact, our office has prosecuted since I became Attorney General and actually got a conviction on someone who was breaking the voter laws in the state of Nebraska. There's been recent, at least public discussion, that during the Biden administration, that an enormous number of people were let over the border under a very broad and probably unlawful definition of our asylum laws, and then subsequently given Social Security numbers, which then enabled some of them, we think, to be able to actually go and get other documents to allow them to register to vote. And a lot of those people ended up in battleground states. So there is a good faith reason to believe that there's potentially a significant voter fraud issue that's going on. And in order to identify whether that issue is taking place or not, the types of information that the Department of Justice is seeking is really important. If you're going to see what kind of Social Security numbers were issued, to say someone who came in with asylum, an asylum seeker, and then they ultimately voted in Nebraska, I think that's something we all should want to know. We don't want non-citizens or ineligible voters who are voting in our elections, and one of the only ways to find that out is to get the information that the Department of Justice seeks. We're going to respond to the lawsuit, and we'll do that in writing, but I think at a high level, I think the information that the Department of Justice is seeking is well within bounds. It's well within the law. Certainly, I'm sensitive to the concerns of Nebraskans about their own personal information. It's one that we all need to take into account, and I think with the appropriate confidential acknowledgement of confidentiality and protection of that information, which is the kind of information that the federal government and the Department of Justice is entrusted with on a daily basis, that kind of like sensitive information, maybe in different contexts. I think the concern to our election system is very high. The work that they're doing is very important. I think they're ultimately entitled to it. Having said that, we are in active litigation, and we have a Nebraska case going on, and we'll see what the court has to say. Does that answer your question, John? Oh, you've got one online.
Ron Johnson from WWT. If there are Nebraskans watching this now who have these cameras, what should they do? Should they take them down immediately? Is there a way for them to work without Wi-Fi? If Nebraskans who might have these cameras feel they have been hacked, what should they do?
Wow, that's a good question. So the question for Ron is, if people have one of these cameras, what are the things that they should do? And can they find out if they've been hacked? What action should they take? It's a really good question. I would be if it was me, I can only do what I would if this was in my household. So I'll just tell you what I would do. I would immediately unplug any Lorex camera. I know cameras are expensive, and it's not with everyone's capability to just go simply buy another one. But I certainly would take it offline and maybe do research as to whether or not there's any patches or fixes that could be applied. I don't know the answer to the question of if it's disconnected from Wi-Fi, what that means. I mean, as I mentioned before, we understand that even if you turn the audio off, it still can be hacked into. The audio itself can still be accessible to hackers. So I would immediately take it down and maybe do some research. We don't have any materials on that to sort of tell people what to do next, but I would absolutely do a little bit of research, and if you can, if you're able to, unplug it and look to get another provider. But at a minimum, I'd unplug it and do a little bit of research. Anything else? Andrew?
I think so.
All right. Well, is it Andrew Ozaki online? Does he have any questions for us coming out of retirement? All right.